I've been flying VR a lot more lately, and I've noticed some difficulties using the controllers to handle some of the more minute knobs like the GPS knobs and so on. So I was thinking what I could do, develop some kind of a system that would make it a little easier for me. So I had some excess PLA laying around to use on my new printer, and I had Air Manager to do the programming and decided to see what I could come up with. And I came up with this little box you see here. This is what I would call the kind of a VR version of the Knobster. As you know, the Knobster allows you with Air Manager panels to use one knob to control all the knobs in the cockpit. Of course, I couldn't do that with Air Manager in VR, so I came up with an option where I programmed a matrix of 9 buttons. I picked 9 because it's small enough that you could feel it with your fingers because you're going to have to do this all with feel. Now I'm going to demo this without VR, but I wanted to show it to you how it works. It works fine in VR, I'll tell you that. You can very easily keep track of these buttons, and you start to learn what they are, but I decided that I should put some oral notification on each button just to confirm which button I've hit to avoid any confusion. So when you touch each button, I'll go through each button and show you what they do. For example, this first button, the upper left,
heading.
You can see it says heading, and what happens then, now that this knob is heading knob, I have an inner and outer knob. The inner knob just changes the heading bug, you can see there.
Vertical speed, barrow.
Oh, I accidentally hit that button. The outer, get it back in heading mode. The inner button, the inner knob, the larger knob, outer knob is an acceleration knob, so you can move it quickly from one end to the other, and then you can make fine corrections with either knob. The second one here is altitude. Oh, I forgot to show you the heading. Let me go back to heading for a second here. And then if you push the button, it
sync heading.
You see it sync the heading up. So if I put the heading off and hit the sync button,
sync
it
heading.
syncs up the heading.
Altitude.
Okay, now let's go to altitude. As we go to altitude, you see the knobs work the same way. I can turn the small knob or the large knob to get a rapid change in altitude indicated, and of course the sync button.
Sync altitude.
Okay. Now the next button, which I accidentally hit
vertical
before,
speed,
is vertical speed. Let's go to make sure the autopilot is in vertical speed. It's not, so let's put it in vertical speed mode, and then we'll go to look at that one. And as you can see now, as I turn the knob, I'm adjusting the vertical speed. Since I don't need a high, that's the vertical speed. Since I don't need a high or low speed, the one speed is good for the vertical speed since you're not moving it that far. I've got this one set for the barrow, and you notice it said vertical speed barrow. Now if I go to barrow, you can see that this knob here is turning the barrow up and down. And if I go back to the vertical speed, you can see if I hit the button,
sync vertical speed.
It'll sync up the vertical speed. Okay, on to row number 2. Now row number 2 is the radios, and what I want to do is show you, we'll do the comm first.
Standby comm 1.
Okay, so that's telling me standby comm 1, which means that you can see the outer knob and the inner knob work just like on any radio. And if I hit the button,
comm 1 transfer.
Okay, it's transferring comm 1 and comm 2.
Comm 1 transfer.
Okay. Now if I hit the comm button again, it's going to switch to 2. Now,
standby comm 2.
I didn't program it to change the highlighting here, but the control of the comm 1 and comm 2, you can see comm 2 now is being adjusted. And if I hit the button, it'll
comm
swap
2
it
transfer.
out.
Comm 2 transfer.
I made this to kind of work with any airplane, so I didn't put the highlighting. There's a special data ref that causes the comm 1 and comm 2 box to shift there, only on the G1000. Of course, this will work with any airplane, so I didn't program that in, but that could be added. But I just want to show you the concept. Now, let's go to the nav side.
Standby nav 1.
It says standby nav 1. You can see I'm changing the standby nav 1 frequency, and I hit the button.
Nav 1 transfer.
Okay, and if I hit the nav button
Standby
again,
nav 2.
now I'm controlling nav 2 in the simulator, and the button, of course, does the
Nav
transfer.
2 transfer.
Okay, so now the next thing we want to look at
OBS 1.
okay, I guess I don't have I'm going to show you that. Let's go to OBS here. I didn't have a preset for that. And I'm going to select the CDI to VOR1. And you see it.
OBS 2. OBS 1.
So there's OBS 1, and you can see I can turn it. You can turn it and so on. Slow with the little knob, big with the big, fast with the big knob. And if I hit the button, I had it set up to go to direct.
VOR1.
It goes direct to VOR1. If I hit number 2,
OBS 2.
and I'll change this to CDI to show 2. Now you can see the same thing. I got CDI 2, small, big one, and
Direct VOR2.
Okay, so there we go. So that gets us through row 2. Now row 3, these first 2 buttons here are for the GPS. Now I have a pop-up in Air Manager. I can show you quickly, I think. If I select the Knobster VR here, that's what I called it, you can see there's a property here to select either G530, G1000, or none for position 1 and 2. So in this case, I have obviously 2 GPSs in this aircraft. So as I'll show you the wide view here, you can see I have one on the left and MFD on the right. So I can control those. And what that controls is this little knob right here. So this knob here, the FMS knob, and when I touch that button, it'll say
G1000 number 1, FMS.
So it tells me the FMS button is there, and I can control that button. There, I'm going to turn you can see I can control the outer knob, and then with the inner knob I can control and then when I push the cursor button, it says cursor. And the FMS2 works the same way. We press that button.
G1000 number 2, FMS.
And the final one is ignition.
Engine number 1, ignition.
So we come over to the engine number 1 ignition. And you can see the knob here. And then we push the button to engage the starter.
Engage starter 1. Release starter.
So that's basically it. I'm going to probably change the programming so that I don't have to listen to the promptings all the time. I find it's useful to know that, because you can get a little confused about which button you've pushed, and it's quite frustrating when nothing happened. But well, there again, I'll go through these one more time.
Heading, altitude, vertical speed, baro, standby com 1, standby nav 2, OBS 1, G1000 number 1, FMS, G1000 number 2, FMS, engine number 2, ignition.
So as you can see, it'll do
Engine
toggle
number 1,
again between
ignition.
So many of them that have number 1 or number 2 toggle, and the others like heading. The 2 knobs are just used for fast speed and slow speed, with the exception
vertical
of
speed, baro,
where it has the barometric on the inner knob. So that's what I've done. I find it's somewhat useful, very useful when I'm wearing the virtual reality goggles, to not have to try to use those hand controllers to turn those GPS knobs. Those were the most difficult. I'll also show you here on a twin engine airplane how the engine start works. We touch
engine number 2, ignition. Engine number 1, ignition.
Okay, so we got ignition for number 1 active. So we go, and then we push the button.
Engage starter 1. Release starter. Engine number 2, ignition. Engage starter 2. Release starter.
Okay, so we started both engines. You can see that certain things toggle, like
Standby COM 2. Standby COM 1. Standby nav 1. Standby nav 2. OBS 2. OBS 1.
then the GPSs are just the 1 and
G1000
number
number
2.
1. FMS. G1000 number 2. FMS.
And then finally we have the ignition. So basic flight controls here, radio stuff here, GPS and ignition on the third row. And that's it. Anyway, love to hear your comments and feedback. If you don't already, subscribe and be sure to like this video. Thanks.